Close your bodily eye, that you may see your picture first with the eye of the Spirit. Then bring to light that which you have seen in the darkness, that its effect may work back, from without to within. Although this sounds much like a quote from one of the shrine guardians or spirits in Breath of the Wild, it is a sentiment much older than the game itself, but it would align well within the context of the tale. With its many sword fights and snowy peaks that frame its landscapes, we see a call back to Romanticism in the form of a beautifully complex love letter in today's modern age, appearing to us in the form of a video game as well as that of an experience. Through comparing each of these expressions of art, we will augment our understanding of art history and the art that we consume today, discovering why Romanticism in Breath of the Wild just works. To gain insight via art history, first we must step back to the 1800s. Romanticism was an artistic and literary movement which came about during the late 1700s per the French Revolution. It was a movement which was an aberration to the ideals which came about from the Enlightenment previously. It pushed back on the notion of order, logic, and the accepted social structure. Artists of this time moved beyond the surface level of life, reaching instead to an emotional connection. They chased after an ideal, which they termed as the Sublime, a concept transcending beauty or understanding, instead provoking admiration and fear simultaneously. The Sublime experience was especially found in nature, being in awe of its power and majesty, thereby learning more about the world and the individual self. To place this movement with its media, here are some artworks which were produced from this era: The Raft of Medusa, Liberty Leading the People, and Wanderer Above the Sea Fog. Novels from this time period include Frankenstein and Les Miserables. Each piece of media referred back to the sublime in its content and called upon a visceral experience in the viewer, remarking upon what it is to be human. As we can see, Romanticism had a powerful and lasting impact well through the 19th century, and the influence of this movement can still be felt today. This brings us back to our nexus point of Breath of the Wild, and placing it within a discussion that clarifies its themes and visuals, which underscore its place as a modern-day work of Romanticism. With its launch on March 7, 2017, Breath of the Wild hung from cliffs, made waves, and transported gamers into an entirely new Zelda universe. Introduced to the public as the 19th installment in the Legend of Zelda series, this game made fans and newcomers pause in its new art, direction, and design aspects. It came with a storyline and gameplay that was based upon an open-world construction, providing gamers a true sense of self-autonomy throughout the universe. When interviewed about the game, director Hidemaru Fujibayashi shared that he wanted players to authentically move throughout the game with the freedom to do what they wanted, making for a self-determined gaming experience. The technical director, Takuhiro Dota, added that he wanted players to feel a sense of accomplishment in completing tasks or the main quest of the game. Fujibayashi-san shared that the team did not have a desire to change the aspects of discovery or exploration in the game. He said that they did not want to alter, quote, the joy that you get from discovering something new, end quote. He has stated several times that this is a core component of the delight in the event that is playing a Zelda game. Despite these guiding principles, the developers pushed themselves to create an experience that was not as straightforward as previous Zelda installments. Gamers were invited into a self-guided journey throughout a story in which they determined their own timeline. The creators even remarked that there is intentionally little talking at the beginning of the game, allowing for players to focus more on visuals and beginning the actual adventure. Players then quickly immerse themselves in discovering more to the story and literally watching the tale play out before them instead of having it all explicitly explained at the start. Fujibayashi-san has commented further on these sentiments, saying that for Breath of the Wild, the team wanted to craft a game that did not have one set of tasks to do or a determined path that all users had to uniformly experience. When speaking about designing the towers, for example, a major aspect of the main quest, He shared that the team debated if and how to make these challenges easier for users to take on. He has remarked that there's a comedy to failing and landing on a game over screen, having to dig into an inner patience to persevere and to continue playing. Through this gameplay, players become more cautious and wiser to their choices. Players learn. Such episodes should build an emotional resilience and readiness for the player to move throughout the rest of the Zelda world in Breath of the Wild, with the knowledge that they have now gained. Ultimately, the team did design the towers to remain as a true challenge, and left it up to users to decide how to take on, avoid, puzzle through, or find loopholes around such difficulties. Overall, the approaches that the team of developers chose created a story that was indicative of individual choice. Players were asked and at times tasked with travel to all corners of the map. However, this was in order to complete a quest of their own making. In creating an individual connection to one's own gameplay and story, the developers made this open world a collection of environments and objects in which players could choose how they wanted to interact with them. In fact, in developing the environment and the game itself, the Breath of the Wild team worked in an old-school 2D Zelda environment to experiment with concepts and test out different outcomes and after effects of player choices. This gameplay development in itself, along with the myriad of outcomes which could come from such an open-world concept, makes for a romanticism undertaking of exploring the self, a player's creativity out in the world, and an adventure which they have crafted, looking into a past and a story embedded within an environment that echoes back our sentiments about success, mundane aspects of living, mistakes, learning, and the ingenuity that is being human. A final note on gameplay and a unique addition to the skills and tools which Link has at his disposal. The developers introduced the Sheikah Slate, a highly applicable tool for Link to use. Players were able to apply different powers at different times, observing and creating a changed environment and a desired outcome. Of the many abilities which the Slate offers, one stands out when connecting back to Romanticism. Zelda beckons Link to awake from his 100-year sleep as the game begins, to wake up and open his eyes. How interesting then, when we reflect back on our opening quote asking the artist to search within and find their own creativity and ingenuity apart from their bodily eye, and to express that emotion outwards to an audience. In this case, we are invited as players to open our eyes, to take in the world of Breath of the Wild. And an additional feature which we are granted in the gameplay is to stop and make a picture. We are asked to take in the landscapes around us, invited to make notes, to capture something beautiful or useful to our experience, and to echo back our lost memories as a hero on a quest to try and save the world, as well as to understand more about himself. In a metacognitive fashion, and to break the fourth wall, we as users are invited to reflect upon our own gameplay as well. We note moments in time that we gained access or knowledge in the story to something new, or to simply enjoy the challenge or beauty of the game itself as we observe vistas and rich environments. These sentiments combined draw us into a deeper understanding and appreciation of the feat that was developing Breath of the Wild, which pushed back on the conventions of the franchise and created something unique, meaningful, and remarkable in the Zelda universe. Now that we have examined the romantic themes of individual journey and connection to environment, we will turn our attention to art theory to bind Breath of the Wild's universe to this art movement over 200 years ago. We'll begin by using art elements to connect Breath of the Wild to Romanticism's characteristics. First, let's begin with space. In the Romanticism art movement, the use of space was key to create immersive and evocative landscapes, filling the positive space in a thought-provoking manner with interesting subjects or natural elements equally as important. A powerful painting which defined the time period and envelops these various aspects is Caspar David Friedrich's Wanderer Above the Sea Fog. Here, we see a central figure, the Wanderer, striking a contemplative and confident pose, overlooking the vast landscape before him. The placement of the figure being in the center of the piece draws our immediate attention to the human element of the painting, to which we automatically contrast the negative space around him. The landscape out in the distance does command some of our attention, and the negative space is used effectively in having its own story to tell, being filled with the mountains in the fog which stretch out before the figure but not as the main focus. The mountains are visible among the sea fog, but they are scattered throughout, fading into the distance. The effective space used in this painting brings in a sense of uncertainty and boundless adventure for us as the viewer. We are in awe of the landscape, together with our fellow guide placed in the center, staring out with anticipation and even nervousness for what is held beyond and below. Now, let's examine the famous cover of the Breath of the Wild game for the North American audience. The similarity between these two pieces is striking and not by accident, as the composition is both meaningful and creates an inspiring image in the viewer's mind. For the Zelda cover, we see Link placed atop of a cliff, overlooking the wide landscape before him, eyeing the castle controlled by Ganon in the distance, along with the various landscapes and kingdoms he must visit in order to accomplish his quest. Similar to the Wanderer, Link is placed as our guide throughout our adventure, as we play through the experience from his perspective. The environment in the distance is blurred, but the clouds open up into a blank sky in the middle of the piece, suggesting hope perhaps in a release of the clouds from the storm, literally and figuratively, into a land which can indeed be covered in light. Viewed together, we see that both pieces effectively and efficiently use the element of space to capture the feeling of an individual against the magnitude of nature and the environment which surrounds oneself, and to suggest the ominous and yet inspiring sublimity and curiosity which those vistas hold for each character as well as for the viewer. Next, let's examine the art element of color. Color was used throughout the Romantic period to especially define the mood and evoke additional emotion. Less concerned with the realistic view of all subjects, there was a push towards dramatic color compositions or selections, fantastical illustrations, and using each color as a way to define that mood. To examine color in the context of the Romantics, let's take a look at Delacroix's Liberty Leading the People. In this painting, we observe Lady Liberty carrying the French flag and leading her compatriots into the French Revolutionary battlefront. With her being as our center of focus, we can see the complementary color scheme immediately introduced to us in the painting. A complementary color scheme is a color palette which uses two colors, which are opposite from one another on the color wheel. Here, we see the colors prominently displayed in the French flag, red and blue, with a neutral tone of white. Echoed throughout the painting are reds and blues, complemented by different types of neutral tones, suggesting themes of the painting and creating a sense of unity in the piece. Rather than break down the entire painting, let's focus on a few color techniques of note. As we can see, Lady Liberty literally embodies the color red in her face, with the cloth tied around her waist as well, the red billowing flag that she holds along with the blue and white, and the red in her hat atop of her head. Red is then worked in throughout the painting, within the faces of the human characters or among their related objects. Red can be a symbol of passion, but in this case it could also symbolize the revolution itself. Indeed, seeing red woven in throughout the piece brings it to life and creates an underlying feeling of urgency. Contrastingly, there are blue elements woven in as well, such as in the shirt of the woman begging at Lady Liberty's feet or the sock of the body of a man in the foreground. Blue runs in the piece as well, from the sky to the tied blue flags on a post in the background. Blue could be interpreted to mean several ideas. Seeing it displayed to us in the French flag as well, we could interpret that blue is a symbol of liberty or liberté. To address the art element of value in this painting, which directly connects to color, we will reference to a popular and effective painting technique, which was applied to this painting as well as many other paintings before and after this piece, and we see pieces of this in analyzing Breath of the Wild. There was a means of creating intense darks and light colors to a piece, and this was coined by an Italian word called chiaroscuro. Quite literally, this phrase means light dark. It refers to those dramatic senses of deep dark values and bright brights in and throughout paintings, which exaggerated and created a strong sense of depth and three-dimensional perception of a piece. We can consider chiaroscuro as the original vignetting frame. We can observe chiaroscuro used in paintings before the age of Romanticism, all the way to today in something as simple as the filters that we use on photos. In Breath of the Wild, we can observe another complementary color scheme at work, similar to what we've just discussed, as well as values exaggerated to create an immersive, 3D feeling gaming experience. There are loads of color schemes applied throughout this specific game, and so for our discussion today, we're only going to focus on neon orange and blues to create the objects and characterizations of Sheikah culture throughout the storyline. To understand the impact of neon color choices, we need to first understand what neon colors are. Neon colors are simply highly saturated colors. They lack any gray mixed within them to create them as a color, and gray can be found in varying degrees in most colors. Saturation simply refers to the intensity of a color or how vivid that color appears to us. Neon colors are so highly saturated, they are so pure that they appear as glowing colors to us when they are compared to the other colors around them with less saturation. Regarding value or the lightness or darkness of a color, neon colors are at the highest end of the value scale. They are bright and they are striking, as opposed to colors which are mid-valued or darker by contrast. The Sheikah culture is introduced to us at the beginning of the game, wherein Link is asleep in a neon blue pool of water, housed in the Shrine of Resurrection. We look around the shrine and note the intricate designs pictured in the glowing blue lines throughout the shrine walls and objects. And soon we gain the Sheikah slate, which combines both the neon blue and neon orange designs in its interface. Blue and orange, as we now know, are complementary colors. They sit across one another on the color wheel. Choosing opposites, as we've learned, can create a powerful and memorable color scheme, and this is exaggerated even more due to the value and saturation of those colors being neon. We learn over time as we encounter these colors again and again that these symbols and these color schemes represent the ancient technology in the presence of the Sheikah people, as they are scattered throughout the journey via shrines, towers, or objects, glowing like beacons in the distance to help us. The use of neon orange and neon blue as a complementary color scheme stand out among the other elements in the game, and with the colors being presented simultaneously, we form an association between the different colors. The neon orange color, we learn, symbolizes untapped or untamed ancient power, as this is pictured by unconquered towers that Link must discover and reclaim for the Kingdom of Hyrule and for good, turning them blue. Neon blue, on the other hand, tends to indicate positivity, hope, or a pure life force, similar to our blue conversation from earlier, as is suggested by the water at the beginning of the game, or shown throughout the game consistently in shrines and other ancient objects which Link has already opened, puzzled through, and brought back to the light into good use. Interestingly, the Guardians are often pictured with both orange and blue colors, or sometimes additionally neon pinks or reds, suggesting that although these machines were created by the Sheikah for a good purpose, that they have been infected and controlled by Ganon's evil malice. Clearly, the use of neon colors truly stands out in comparison to the landscape, and each time we observe these colors, their neon glow is reflected off of the surfaces they touch and reverberates outwards, similar to the impact of the Sheikah people on Hyrule and the surrounding lands. Regardless of the colors which surround them, these neon colors, specifically neon blue and neon orange, make for a powerful pair and teach the gamer quickly to identify and associate different lessons and meanings with each color throughout the gameplay. This has created such layered meaning and an encompassed world with its own lore and history and visual expectation that it truly envelops the player throughout the experience, similar to Delacroix's painting enveloping the audience as well. Lastly, the aforementioned vignette effect is also observed in this game, simply through creating a sense of emotion, tension, or altering perception with a light vignette around the frame. Though not as exaggerated as the earlier technique mentioned, we can still observe darkened corners and a sense of tightened focus per suggestion of vignetting in scenes. Each time a vignette overlay is used, they heighten the experience for the user and they beg the attention to be focused on an item, a character, a discovery, a memory, and so on. Now that we have discussed the art elements at play, we will now examine the art principles to further discuss the romantic themes which are incorporated in Breath of the Wild. First, let's examine proportion. Proportion is an art principle that references the realistic or exaggerated proportions afforded to us in an art piece, with the relationships of characters or objects being compared to one another as internal reference. Look at the previous two paintings. We can now see a use of exaggerated proportion and how the leading figure, the Wanderer or Lady Liberty, are pictured so as to suggest that they are larger-than-life, central figures to both stories and scenes which are presented in relation to the objects or people around them. Proportion is a key element running through the visual design of Breath of the Wild as well, and using this principle to suggest a sense of scale draws into focus how insignificant Link can look when cross-compared to vast scenery, larger-than-life enemies, or challenging terrain, winding interiors, and the like that we find ourselves surrounded by throughout the tale. Proportion continues to be an incredibly important principle in creating an immersive gaming experience, and it magnifies the relationship of Link to the nature or objects which surround him. The other art principle to mention that runs throughout this piece is the sense or realistic use of movement. Movement in an art piece is a principle which references how our eyes move around in a composition, taking in its individual parts and analyzing the piece as a whole. In the previous two paintings, we can see a use of either vertical or horizontal movement through strategic composition and other art elements or principles, making an engaging painting to analyze and think about long after its initial viewing. Most obviously, Breath of the Wild is a video game, affording variable, violent, soothing, and engaging gameplay and movement throughout the story. We encounter all sorts of end outcomes based upon that move that we make throughout the game, and at times this game literally slows us down or speeds us up in a way to add an element of adventure, dynamicism, unpredictability, or a slowed down experience in order to consider each action, mission, or quest in its time. Altogether, there is an undeniable echo of romanticism that is sprinkled throughout the Zelda universe, most especially noted in the Breath of the Wild. This game remains successful and compelling even today, and it will remain so as a lasting icon in gaming history as a testament to new innovation and a fascinating and alluring game and art experience. Therein lies the thesis of this art essay. The connection between Romanticism and some of its most famous themes and works can be felt throughout The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, bringing together two powerful attributions to the history of art and gameplay in our time. Interacting and creating within a vast visual environment, as seen in both Romanticism and Breath of the Wild, helps us to discover as an audience our sense of inherent resilience, human ingenuity, and through searching for a sublime, we can discover and appreciate the sublimity which is in and all around us. If you enjoyed this deep dive into art history and modern day media and you want to learn more, please check out my channel, leave me a comment, like, subscribe, and share with me your own art analysis, thoughts, or what we should look at next. Included are several paintings to cross-compare from Breath of the Wild to Romanticism, back and forth, to observe and appreciate how deep this thread of art history runs even in this modern media today. This all said, until next time, thank you for watching, and enjoy art so you can enjoy more of your life. I am Lindy's Colors.